Right, we've roped in Director at Seekers Finders Forensic Investigation Services, Dorothy Mmushi, to speak to us about kidnapping-related cases in this country. Dorothy, a very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for your time. So help us place, firstly, why we are seeing a rise in kidnapping cases in South Africa, especially when you consider there is at least one known kidnapping syndicate operating across several provinces in this particular matter.
Thank you for having me this afternoon. The reason there's been a significant rise in kidnappings is due to the socio-economic status of the country, and also because a lot of our criminals believe that the incentives of being involved in kidnapping are higher than the risks. So you'll find a lot of your criminals who have previously been involved in cash and transit robberies now rather being involved in kidnappings. And we also find a lot of our opportunistic criminals trying to now move into the angle of kidnapping for ransom. The reason for that is because people believe that once you are able to get control over an individual, you are able to coerce them or their family members into giving you financial gains.
I mean, there is, if you just, listen to public outcry, there's a growing concern about public safety now across the country, given too that there was that 11% increase in kidnappings reported in the 2023-24 a year, from the previous year, which also begs the question, are law enforcement agencies well equipped to deal with this rise in this particular, criminality that we are seeing when we speak about kidnappings, which is fast becoming a crisis, quite frankly, and supposedly also driven by organized crime?
Well, yes, you are correct in saying there has been a significant increase. If you look at a recent study done by the Institute for Security Studies, there's on minimum 2 kidnappings daily happening in South Africa. That's how bad the scourge has happened. And what I can say is law enforcement is equipped, but however, given the influx, the rapid rate at which it's happening is not, they're not having enough human resources to be able to handle the influx of the number of reported cases that are coming through. And this is why we in private industry are having a lot of inquiries and people requiring our assistance in dealing with investigations related to kidnappings.
Yeah, Olorato's case was a huge eye-opener and quite frankly, just scared a lot of women, particularly given the sense that we heard from police just how many women called in to relate similar stories, speaking about similar, suspects that were involved in that particular case. In your line of work, speak to us about what you're seeing in as far as kidnappings are concerned, particularly when we look at also, kidnappings that are coupled with child trafficking and also just the modus operandi that is being used here.
Okay, so in our instances, the prevalent types of kidnappings that we've seen is kidnapping for ransom, which is mostly perpetrated against business people. We've picked up that this would normally happen amongst like your foreign national business people, and they would then organize this against each other using our criminal syndicates that are in South Africa. And then when it comes to kidnapping involving women and children, there's various reasons why these happen. With children, we've picked up that children get kidnapped, for example, these days for muti killings, for ritual purposes. We've also seen an increase in kidnapping of children for the sexual trade, which is quite disturbing as well. And then we also find a lot of people also kidnapping people for political purposes, or even your tenderpreneurs, where, for example, we've seen that people who are involved in a tender have bad blood with their accomplices, and then all of a sudden they try and kidnap one of their colleagues. So there has been a significant increase in the scourge of kidnapping, irrespective of which line or which level of lifestyle you are living, you are actually vulnerable to kidnappings. I can also give you an example of people who have been kidnapped randomly on the street, as you've said, with this recent case that happened in Benoni. So it is quite an alarming scourge that has increased.
And just going back to kidnappings for ransom, speak to us about just some of the outcomes that you are seeing in those particular cases. I mean, do survivors come out alive in some of the cases that you've dealt with? And of course, how then do they start recovering?
Okay. Luckily, some of these victims, they have managed to come out alive. But in some instances, some people are not so fortunate. So this is something that is quite alarming, and people should take precaution in terms of not finding themselves to be victims of being of a kidnapping or an abduction. Because as you can see, it's quite rife, especially, as we said, amongst women and children. With the business people, it is now slowly increasing because of the socio-economic crisis in South Africa, where our criminals are trying to get a quick buck with less risks.
Yeah, very quickly, Dorothy, as we wrap our conversation, in the likelihood that somebody finds themselves in that situation and their families are contacted, what should they do?
The first thing they need to do is to contact the SAPS. I know most of the time the perpetrators would say, do not contact the police. And sometimes when people do reach out to us or to the police, it's when it's a bit too late, like 2 days or 3 days after an individual has been abducted or kidnapped. So I would advise that as soon as you've been made aware that someone has been kidnapped, the first thing to do is to report the matter to the SAPS so that crime intelligence can be allocated to handle that matter, because time is of the utmost importance when you are dealing with a kidnapping case.
Yeah, not a good one to be discussing, but thank you so much for those tips, Dorothy Mmushi there. Of course, she is a director at Seekers Finders Forensic Investigation Services, just speaking about the high levels of kidnapping cases in the country.